My name is Bonnie Klein, and I've been involved with the wood turning field for more than 40 years. I retired about 4 years ago in 2016, and I quit doing demonstrations, traveling to do demos, and I quit teaching. But there is something that I wanted to share with people that I've been using in the bowl turning process. And I wanted to make this video showing some of the techniques I use for turning green wood, and these techniques can be used for any size bowl. I'm using a small bowl in the video, but I also would like to talk about safety. I won't be wearing a face mask for this demo because I can't talk behind the face mask. I've taken my rings off. My fingernails have grown since I've retired. I should have cut them for the video. Another reason I wanted to make this video is when I teach classes, I don't use chucks in the classes. I like to discourage the use of chucks. I think it's not the grip all that some people think it is. It's easy to pop something out of a chuck. So in this process, we'll be preparing a piece of wood, gluing it onto a faceplate glue block, and I have prepared many of these faceplate glue blocks. Here's the Frugal Woodturner's tip. Since this lathe is a 1'8" spindle, you can buy a 1'8" lock nut and remove the nylon part of the lock nut and drill a hole in a piece of wood and embed this lock nut and epoxy it in place. And these faceplates can be used over and over again until they get so short that you start running into metal. Then you just glue another layer of wood on top of them. And for classes, typically I would be preparing a couple dozen faceplates at a time. And that way, if you have a workpiece on something, you don't have to take it out of the chuck and try to put it back in the chuck and get it in the same way. It's difficult to if you have a dig in, it's difficult to pop this out off of the faceplate, and it would be much easier if it was in a chuck. That's one of the reasons I don't like using the chucks. I don't like the mass of that metal turning around for a beginning wood turner, and I don't like I don't think it grips as well as gluing your workpiece to a dry waste block. So we'll get on with the process. I'll show a little bit of how I cut a piece out of a log, wet wood, and how I prepare it and go through the turning process. Since we're doing green wood, we're going to start with a log section about the diameter of the bowl that you want to make. Cut it in half down the pith. You can tack a little disc on the top with a pin, and when you can cut it out with the bandsaw, and that way you get a nice round blank. You can have discs of different sizes for different size logs. This one I cut to make it flatter, just to take some wood away, but this is it's drilled, ready to go on the lathe now. We're going to be turning green wood, and I like using a screw chuck, and this is one of my favorites. It's made by Glazer Tools, and you can change the top to accommodate different size pieces of wood. The important part is this nice sharp screw, but this little disc can be put on this way or used without the disc. But for this size bowl, I'm just going to put this disc on here. I've pre-drilled the hole for 1/4 inch. Okay, I've got the workpiece mounted on the lathe, and I'm going to this is not going to be about how to turn a bowl. Most of this is about the technique. So I'll just be turning without doing a whole lot of talking, getting the outside of this bowl prepared. I'm not in favor of using 3-jaw or 4-jaw chucks to create a tenon and use that to hold the bowl blank. I've come up with a way of being able to center this bowl blank on a glue block on a faceplate, and I'd like to show you how I do that. I'm going to use a plug cutter in a drill chuck in the tailstock, and you can get plug cutters in different sizes. I'm going to use a 3/8, but it really wouldn't matter. All this is going to do is going to create a centering device to get this centered on my faceplate. So I drill a hole in the faceplate to match the plug cutter. I'm going to prepare the bottom. The bottom needs to be flat, so I'm going to just make a couple cuts on the bottom. I'm going to use the plug cutter to create just a very shallow plug. All we need is just enough to center it in the hole, and then the surrounding area needs to be flat. And you need to check to make sure that's absolutely flat. And when you drill your hole in your faceplate, you need to make sure that's also flat. I'm going to make one more cut on the outside. After you've prepared that little tenon with the plug cutter, make sure that each surface is flat and that your faceplate glue block is flat, and then check it, match it up, and make sure that there's no gaps. And because this is green wood and this is dry wood, we're going to use CA glue, super glue, the thicker version, to glue the two pieces together. And I usually put that on the floor and step on it to make sure that it's pressed together hard. So this needs to set for 20 to 30 minutes. It takes a while for that glue to set up. This piece is ready to go. The glue is set up. We're going to be doing the inside of the bowl this time. I always like to check and see how true it runs. Right on. About 1/4 inch in the bottom. One of the great advantages of turning green wood is that you can wet sand it. And I'm going to be using just a couple different grits. I'll be starting with 150, and I like this cloth-backed sandpaper that you can just tear the pieces the size you want, and dip it in water and get the piece wet. You could do this with dry wood also. I have a friend that wet sands with oil on the dry wood, and it eliminates the sanding dust. That's one of the other advantage of turning green wood, is that you can eliminate the sanding dust. like to wipe the previous grit off before starting with a finer grit. I'm using 150 and about 220. I'm going to use a thin parting tool and cut through the waste block. I'll actually be cutting through the waste block and that little tenon that I created, and to part the bowl away. Good catch. These faceplates can be used over and over and over again. I can just make this surface flat in preparation for the next project. Flat. When you start running into the metal, you can just glue another piece on and make it flat and be ready to go again. Bowl turning requires 3 turnings. The first turning would be the outside of the bowl, the second one would be the inside of the bowl, and then you need to reverse chuck it to do the desired foot or bottom of the bowl. So for turning the bottom of the bowl, I like to use these plywood discs, mount them on the screw chuck. I just drill a hole, 1/4 inch hole, mount it on the screw chuck. I have these in different sizes for different size bowls. And since we're going to be mounting this one on here, I'm going to turn the lathe on and create some concentric circles to give me a guide for the gluing process. I'm going to be gluing this on with hot melt glue, but one of the most important things is to figure out how much depth you have in the bottom of the bowl. So I use my little trusty homemade depth gauge, and I have a good 1/4 inch in the bottom. So I'm going to center this on one of these rings that I drew and put about 5 or 6 little gobs of glue, hot melt glue, around the rim. That should hold it. Now we have to wait for that to dry. The glue has set up, and now we're ready to turn the foot. And I kind of like a plain, simple foot. So I'm going to use, part of the time I'm going to use my spindle gouge. It actually runs pretty true. I'm going to get rid of the faceplate glue block material. There's a little bit of bark still on there. I don't usually like to turn this much of the outside after I've finished the bowl. I don't usually like to turn any of the outside. I always check to make sure the bottom is flat and will sit flat on the table and there's not a high spot in the middle. So now I would wet sand this before I remove it from the lathe. Okay, I wet sanded the outside of the bowl, and sometimes you get lucky and the glue will be loose enough or soft enough that I can pull the bowl away. If the wood is drier than that, this is still pretty wet. If it's drier than that, you may have to put it in the microwave and it'll soften up the glue and you can just pull the bowl off. So there's the finished bowl. And at this stage, I let them dry, and once they're dry, then I'll apply a wipe-on finish. The wood I used for this bowl, for this video, is madrone. It's a beautiful wood to turn when it's wet, and it does not move too much when it's dry. This is a bowl I turned a while ago, made out of the same wood. It's just wet sanded and has not got a finish on it yet, but I wait until it dries. You can see that it's changed shape a little bit. It's gone oval, or gone sideways, and the sides drop down. I like that curve that it creates in the drying process. And it's gone oval a little bit. Some of these other bowls they're made out of mesquite, and mesquite just does not move at all. Some woods will move more than other woods. A lot of these little bowls are made out of mesquite, and they hardly move at all. Part of the secret of getting a bowl to dry successfully is having the wall thickness fairly even throughout the sides and the bottom. You wouldn't want to leave a big thick bottom and thin sides. They're more likely to crack. Thanks for watching. I hope this was useful, and I hope you go create a bunch of nice little bowls. It's really good practice to just get a section of green wood log and make a bunch of little bowls in the 5 or 6 inch range. You'd be surprised how many times you'll use them in your kitchen. Typically I would put an oil finish on after they've dried. So thank you very much. Over and out.